0247, the Strait of Hormuz, latitude 26 degrees north. Inside the USS Carney's Combat Information Center, a sensor technician slammed his fist onto a console. Signal detected. Vishnu-class intelligence ship bearing 180. They're bridging a live targeting feed to the Iranian mainland. On the flight deck 50 miles away, a pair of EA-18G Growlers shrieked into the dark. If that Russian signal wasn't cut in the next 90 seconds, a volley of Iranian anti-ship missiles would have a perfect lock on 5,000 American sailors. The tactical action officer had 11 seconds to call the intercept. Miss it, and a $13 billion carrier strike group becomes the primary target of a saturation missile strike. Here is how that 12-minute naval countdown begins. The Russian Vishnu-class intelligence vessel, the Viktor Leonov, was sitting like a silent predator 12 miles off the Iranian coast. For days, it had been operating as a covert digital relay bridge. The Iranians were being jammed into electronic oblivion by U.S. electronic warfare assets. But the Russians had found a critical loophole. They were acting as a proxy radar platform. The Leonov used its advanced passive sensors to track the thermal wakes of U.S. Navy destroyers, then relayed that targeting data through a hardened high-frequency uplink to Iranian anti-ship missile batteries hidden in the limestone cliffs of Bandar Abbas. Growlers are feet dry, the radio crackled. The two EA-18G Growler electronic attack aircraft tore through the electromagnetic spectrum at combat speed. The pilots activated their ALQ-218 tactical jamming pods. On the Russian intelligence ship below, the radar screens didn't just go fuzzy, they inverted. The U.S. Growlers weren't simply flooding the signal with electronic noise. They were digital hijackers executing a sophisticated cyber warfare operation. They intercepted the Russian uplink and began feeding it a continuous loop of false telemetry. Suddenly, the Iranian missile batteries relying on Russian eyes saw the entire U.S. fleet jump 50 miles to the south on their targeting displays. The bold move Moscow thought would humiliate the Fifth Fleet was now a digital cage. The Leonov was still transmitting, but it was now screaming coordinated lies back to Iran. Moscow had tried to hand Iran the keys to the Persian Gulf, but the U.S. Navy just changed the locks while the Russians were still turning the handle. Commander Hayes on the bridge of the USS Carney watched the signal strength on his combat display drop to 0. "Bridge them," he ordered. He wasn't talking about a radio call. He was ordering a physical maritime blockade. The Carney, a 9,000-ton Arleigh-Burke-class destroyer, accelerated to 35 knots, slicing through dark international waters to position itself directly between the Russian intelligence ship and the Iranian coastline. This was the Shroud. The Russian spy ship was now blind, deaf, and physically trapped by an American-guided missile destroyer painting it with active fire control radar, just to send one unmistakable message: we see you, we own you. While the electronic warfare battle was being won in nanoseconds, the horizon was about to erupt with the full weight of American naval power. For weeks, the USS Gerald R. Ford and USS Abraham Lincoln had been holding the critical line, keeping the strategic waterway open. But at 0300, the hat trick arrived. The USS George H.W. Bush surged into the region fresh off a high-speed Atlantic transit. This is the hat trick, the rare and strategically terrifying concentration of 3 nuclear-powered supercarriers in a single theater of combat operations. 300,000 tons of sovereign American territory, over 240 advanced strike aircraft, enough BGM-109 Tomahawk cruise missiles to level a medium-sized country. The Bush didn't just arrive, it brought the kill web. By integrating its advanced sensor arrays with the Ford and the Lincoln, the U.S. Fifth Fleet constructed a fully networked system of systems that covered every square mile of the Persian Gulf. The Russian intelligence officers aboard the Leonov watched their legacy radar screens saturate with over 1,000 coordinated ghost targets generated by the U.S. fleet's synchronized electronic jamming. At 0304, the Iranians tested the outer perimeter. An IRGC Cayman 22 surveillance drone, likely launched to determine whether the Russian data bridge was still operational, crossed the established red line 40 miles from the carrier strike group. It didn't receive a warning. The USS Carney launched an RIM-174 Standard Extended Range Active Missile, the SM-6. The SM-6 is a $4.3 million next-generation air defense masterpiece. It doesn't simply fly toward a target, it hunts. Capable of engaging threats at the edge of the stratosphere or intercepting low-altitude threats beyond the visual horizon using its own active radar seeker, the SM-6 represents the cutting edge of integrated air and missile defense. The drone was vaporized at 25,000 feet. The detonation was so precise it didn't generate a thermal bloom detectable by Russian sensors. The hat trick wasn't a show of force. It was a total exclusion zone declaration. While the U.S. Fifth Fleet physically and electronically suppressed Russian and Iranian naval capabilities, the Israeli Air Force identified the combat window they had been waiting for. This was the parallel strategic coordination that Moscow catastrophically failed to predict. Exploiting the complete electronic blackout created by Fifth Fleet Growlers, a classified squadron of Israeli F-35 Ayadir stealth multi-role fighters slipped deep into Iranian airspace. They weren't operating blind. They were receiving a real-time God's Eye targeting feed from U.S. Navy, E-2D Advanced Hawkeye Airborne, early warning aircraft, via encrypted Link 16 data links. Their mission objective: 3 secret hardened missile production facilities buried beneath the Zagros mountain range. These weren't standard military installations. They were covert manufacturing sites for Iran's classified hypersonic missile prototypes, advanced technology that Russia had smuggled into Iran under the diplomatic cover of civilian energy infrastructure agreements. The U.S. Fifth Fleet ensured no Russian surveillance satellite or Iranian ground-based radar could detect the incoming strike. U.S. guided missile destroyers repositioned along critical line-of-sight corridors, emitting massive, coordinated electronic interference that created an impenetrable digital fog across all Zagros mountain flight paths. At 0312, the Israeli jets released their AGM-154 joint standoff weapons. The JSOW is a precision-guided stealthy glide munition that allows strike aircraft to remain 60 miles beyond the effective range of enemy air defenses. It carries no engine. It uses precision aerodynamic surfaces to glide silently through thin mountain air toward its designated target coordinates. 3 hardened facilities, 3 direct impacts. The JSOW munitions penetrated reinforced ventilation shafts with surgical GPS-guided precision. Secondary detonations were so catastrophically large, they registered as a 3.2 magnitude seismic event on regional earthquake monitoring networks. The Russian technical advisors at the facility didn't have time to reach for their boots. The parallel coordination executed flawlessly. The U.S. provided the electronic shroud. Israel delivered the precision strike hammer. The commander of the Viktor Leonov made one final desperate maneuver. He ordered his intelligence vessel to execute a 180-degree emergency turn and accelerate directly toward the USS George H.W. Bush, attempting to close range and bring legacy passive sensors online that couldn't be electronically jammed. It was a calculated bluff, classic Cold War maritime chicken. He was met with the wall. The USS Florida, a converted Ohio-class guided missile submarine, executed a tactical emergency surface just 200 yards off the Russian ship's port bow. A 560-foot black steel hull suddenly emerged from the black water like a modern Leviathan. The USS Florida carries 154 BGM-109 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles. When that black sail breaches the surface, it is the ultimate psychological checkmate in modern naval warfare. The Russian commander understood immediately. A single Tomahawk can loiter over a designated target area for hours, awaiting a digital strike command. If he exposed a single deck-mounted defensive weapon, the USS Florida could ripple fire a dozen Tomahawk missiles before his crew could sound the general alarm. To drive the strategic message home, 2 MH-60R Seahawk naval helicopters hovered 50 feet above the Leonov's bridge. Their rotor wash coated the ship's sensitive antenna arrays in corrosive salt spray. The message required no translation. You are not a player in this engagement. You are a designated target. The Leonov cut its engines. It went completely dark. Moscow's bold strategic gambit had officially ended in humiliating radio silence. To maintain the Russian intelligence blackout and ensure the Israeli precision strike remained tactically invisible, Fifth Fleet Growlers employed AGM-88 armed anti-radiation missiles, locked onto every active Iranian coastal radar installation. U.S. pilots never fired. The mere missile lock-on warning on Iranian radar operator screens caused them to immediately shut down their systems in self-preservation panic. A radar that is powered off is a radar that is tactically useless. The RUM-139 vertical launch ASROC was also employed when an Iranian Guideer-class midget submarine attempted to slip silently from port to shadow the carrier battle group. The USS Laboon launched a RUM-139 VLA, a rocket-delivered system that carries a Mark 54 lightweight torpedo, traveling at 600 miles per hour through the air to intercept a submarine threat before it can clear the harbor entrance channel. The Iranian submarine immediately executed an emergency full reverse. Finally, the RIM-162 evolved Sea Sparrow missile provided point defense coverage against a probing rocket salvo launched from IRGC fast attack patrol boats. The ESSM can execute 50G evasive turns during terminal intercept, meaning it can destroy a radar cross-section target the size of a surfboard traveling at supersonic velocity. The economic and strategic accounting of the engagement was devastating in its asymmetry. Russia invested millions in a sophisticated covert signals intelligence operation, dismantled in under 12 minutes. Iran lost an estimated $200 million in classified hypersonic missile research and 3 secret hardened production facilities. The U.S. Navy, meanwhile, treated the entire multi-domain engagement as a scheduled training evolution. This is the operational efficiency of a fully networked superpower military. When a dominant force doesn't simply win a tactical engagement, but makes the adversary understand they should never have initiated it. The decision speed advantage. Moscow's strategic failure was ultimately a failure of imagination. Russian military planners assumed the U.S. would respond to their proxy intelligence operation through traditional diplomatic channels or legacy military deterrence protocols. They failed to comprehend that they were engaged against a fully integrated system of systems. The targeting data enabling the Israeli strike wasn't sourced from a static cartographic database. It was a live networked kill chain. Intelligence originated 500 miles above the Earth's surface aboard a KH-11 reconnaissance satellite, was processed through an E-2D Hawkeye airborne battle management platform circling the Gulf, and was delivered with millisecond precision directly to JSOW munitions gliding through the Zagros mountain corridors. The U.S. Fifth Fleet served as the integrated information gatekeeper. By networking the Ford, Lincoln, and Bush into a single unified sensor grid, they constructed a battle space where U.S. and allied forces operated with a 100% information superiority advantage, while Russian and Iranian forces navigated a complete information blackout. This is why the decision speed differential was so operationally decisive. A U.S. tactical action officer on a guided missile destroyer possesses the professional autonomy to assign an SM-6 intercept to an incoming target in under 3 seconds. The Russian commander of the Leonov had to await a satellite communications link back to the Kremlin for permission to alter his ship's heading. By the time Moscow transmitted a response, the engagement was already concluded. Despite the combined billions of dollars in Tomahawk cruise missiles, fifth-generation stealth aircraft, and space-based intelligence assets, the decisive advantage of the night belonged to the human element. U.S. Fifth Fleet sailors demonstrated zero hesitation throughout the engagement. Consider the tactical action officer on watch. He possessed 11 seconds to authorize the SM-6 intercept against the Cayman-22 drone. He didn't request Washington authorization. He didn't seek a second opinion from senior staff. He trusted the Aegis combat system and his professional training. That level of tactical autonomy and decision confidence is the foundational characteristic that makes the American naval war machine operationally unstoppable. Contrast this directly with IRGC personnel at the targeted facilities. When JSOW munitions impacted their hardened structures, Iranian soldiers were still diagnosing why their radar networks had gone dark, waiting for command authority that never arrived because their entire communications infrastructure had been systematically vaporized by U.S. electronic warfare jamming. This is the operational difference between a networked, empowered force and a legacy, permission-dependent force. The speed of the human decision determines the outcome of modern multi-domain warfare. By 0400, the Strait of Hormuz had returned to strategic silence. The Russian Viktor Leonov was limping toward international waters at reduced speed. Its sensitive electronic intelligence collection arrays likely permanently degraded by the sustained intensity of U.S. Growler jamming operations. Iranian coastal anti-ship missile batteries had gone silent across the entire Gulf littoral. Their Russian proxy data bridge was shattered beyond operational repair. The USS George H.W. Bush assumed its designated position in the carrier battle line. 3 supercarriers, 3 sovereign cities of steel, 1 unified strategic purpose. Trillions of dollars in daily global energy commerce continued flowing undisturbed through the world's most critical maritime choke point, unmarked by the shadow multi-domain war that had just concluded in total darkness. The hat trick of 3 carrier strike groups wasn't theater. It was a binding strategic promise. Any future attempt to destabilize regional security, provide covert targeting intelligence to U.S. adversaries, or challenge freedom of navigation through international waters would be met with immediate, coordinated, and overwhelming decisive force. Moscow had attempted to reposition the strategic pieces on the board. The Fifth Fleet simply removed the board entirely. For the sailors aboard the Carney, it was time for breakfast. No celebration, no cheering. Watch was handed to the next qualified crew. The Russian operation was identified. The threat was neutralized. The covert production facilities were destroyed. For the world's most capable and technologically advanced naval fleet, it was just another Tuesday at the office. As sunrise broke over the Persian Gulf, the strategic reality of 21st century naval warfare was unmistakably clear. In modern multi-domain conflict, the decisive winner controls the complete flow of networked battlespace information. Russia attempted to weaponize targeting data as a strategic asset for Iran. They were checkmated by a naval force that wrote the foundational rules of data-centric warfare. The U.S. Fifth Fleet didn't achieve operational dominance because they fielded more missiles. They won because their missiles were smarter, faster, and precisely linked to a God's-eye networked intelligence picture that their adversaries couldn't comprehend, let alone counter. By seamlessly integrating Fifth Fleet sensor networks with Israeli Air Force strike assets and U.S. space-based reconnaissance systems, they engineered a battle space where the enemy was operationally defeated before they recognized they were engaged in a fight.